Hi, everyone. This is Glenn Greenwald, and I am excited about our new episode of System Update here on our home at Rumble. And I say I'm excited because I feel what we're about to do is quite important. What I want to do is show you how readily and casually and aggressively and clearly corporate media outlets disseminate outright lies. And I want to use a 2-minute clip from Morning Joe involving the host of that show, Joe Scarborough, and the former 2-term Democratic Senator from Missouri, Claire McCaskill, and break down this clip to show you why it is that I so often say that fake news and disinformation comes not from people on Facebook or teenagers on 4chan or whatever else is blamed for the dissemination of fake news and disinformation. It comes most frequently and most destructively from the very corporate news outlets like NBC News that claim to be so profoundly concerned about disinformation to the point that they believe they can censor the internet and should censor the internet in the name of protecting you from it. And in reality, they are pathological liars. Now, for me, this word lie has become very overused in journalism. It used to be used very scrupulously, very discriminatingly, and yet it is now indiscriminate. But I, as a journalist, try very hard only to use it in its most classical meaning, which is the assertion of a factual claim that is demonstrably false, where the person disseminating the falsehood either knows that what they're saying is false or is saying it with reckless disregard for whether or not it's true, meaning they just simply don't care whether or not it's true. And this 2-minute clip that I'm going to show you involves not 1 or 2 lies and not 3 lies, but at minimum 4 and probably 5 lies, one right after the next. It's just a 2-minute video clip I want to walk you through about the case of Julian Assange. Now, as many of you probably know, last week in the UK, there was a court ruling. An appellate court ruled that the Biden Justice Department's attempt to extradite Julian Assange from the UK to the United States to stand trial, where they want to prosecute him under the Espionage Act, in connection with the publication of numerous reports he did in 2010, along with the New York Times, The Guardian, El País, Der Spiegel, and numerous media outlets around the world. They want to prosecute him for that on 18 felony counts under the Espionage Act. And a court in January in London had ruled that the extradition was improper. Assange had won, and she said it was improper because the U.S. court system was so harsh and repressive that given Assange's mental health and the deterioration of it from the last 10 years in detention, there was a good chance he would kill himself. The appellate court, the Biden Justice Department, appealed that ruling that Assange won, asked that Assange be kept in prison during the pendency of that appeal, and he was. And last week, as the New York Times article there that you see on December 10th indicates, the U.S. court ruled that Julian Assange can be extradited to the U.S. Now, this is a topic I've been covering for years. I did a live report right here on Rumble about that ruling when it was released. So you can go and watch this on Rumble. You can also read my articles about it on Substack to see the details of the case, of that ruling, of everything that has happened. But what I want to focus on is a 2-minute discussion that occurred on MSNBC, which is part of NBC News, on Morning Joe between Joe Scarborough and Claire McCaskill, that's 2 minutes long, that was designed to not only tell their viewers about this ruling that the Biden Justice Department won in getting Julian Assange extradited, but also, as you'll see, both of them are trying to convince viewers of MSNBC, however many there are, not many, but the viewers of MSNBC, which then get disseminated over NBC News networks, which is much more influential, that Assange is a criminal, that it's an open and shut case. And what I want to do is ask you to just watch the 2-minute segment I'm about to show you, where they tell one lie after the next in order to justify his prosecution as a criminal. And then I'm going to break down for you each lie that they told and prove to you that everything they said in the clips I'm going to show you is an absolute and complete lie, using the restricted classic definition of lie that I gave you, so you can see how easily and constantly these news corporations, the employees of these media outlets, these media corporations, lie to the public constantly. So here's the 2-minute clip. Please just watch it with me from start to finish.
The politics of this. As a prosecutor, you're given this case, and you've got a guy who's stolen thousands of documents, pages of highly classified national security documents, released them to the world, and in so doing, put the lives of U.S. troops, of people who were working with the United States, allies, collaborators in war zones in the gravest of danger. Under any scenario, you take politics out of it, and this is an open and shut case. This is not the Pentagon Papers. This wasn't Times editors rifling through documents, figuring out what could be released and what couldn't be released and explaining it. This was a guy that got stolen documents and gave it to the world.
This is a pretty simple case. It's very straightforward. And the beauty of a trial, Joe, is that you narrow all of the extraneous stuff to the charges that are there against the defendant. And the charges in this case are that he was trying to hack into our military information that protects not just our country, but all the men and women in uniform around the world. This is really serious stuff. Forget about the politics. The fact that both the right and the left don't like Julian Assange or love Julian Assange, depending on the circumstances that's being talked about, that should tell you all you need to know. This is really a guy who just violated the law. And, you know, I kind of laugh. If their fight against extradition is that they're worried about his safety in prison, they really don't have perspective on this. There are lots and lots of people who go to federal prison who have done really worse things than Julian Assange, and they are protected in prison. I don't think he needs to worry about whether or not he'll be safe in prison. This is really just a smokescreen to try to keep him from ever being accountable for the rule of law. You know, we started talking about Trump being accountable.
I don't have words to express what liars those two people are that we just listened to. And before I get to their individual lies, one way that you can know that they're lying is that just in that short clip alone, Joe Scarborough completely contradicted himself about the core claim he was making. First, he said that Julian Assange himself stole thousands of top secret or classified documents, which is an absolute lie. Not even the government claims that Julian Assange himself stole any of the documents that he published. But that's what Joe Scarborough said. 5 seconds later, he then said the exact opposite, which happens to be the truth, which is that Julian Assange received documents that were stolen by his source, Chelsea Manning, just like journalists receive documents stolen by their sources all the time, like the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case got documents taken by Daniel Ellsberg, like the documents that I published from Edward Snowden, I received after he took them, like WikiLeaks did, in many cases, like the New York Times did when someone took Donald Trump's tax returns and gave it to them and provided it to them. He contradicted himself within the course of 5 seconds by making one claim: Julian Assange stole top secret documents. That was the exact antithesis, the exact opposite of the claim that 5 seconds later he went on to say, which is that Julian Assange received stolen documents stolen by someone else. Now, let's just go step by step through each of these lies and then look at the evidence proving definitively how clear it is that they're lying on NBC News about one of the most important press freedom cases in years in order to convince the public to clap and applaud the government for trying to keep Julian Assange in prison. If you want to make that argument, go ahead and make it. It's a bizarre argument for people who call themselves journalists to make, but if you want to make it, they have the right to. But what they don't have the right to do is to tell complete and utter demonstrable lies, and yet that's exactly what they did. So let's look at the first clip of them lying.
Politics of this. As a prosecutor, you're given this case, and you've got a guy who's stolen thousands of documents, pages of highly classified national security documents.
Okay. He's claiming that Julian Assange stole thousands of pages of classified documents. That is a complete and utter lie. Nobody believes that. No one thinks that. Not even the government is claiming that the documents that were published by WikiLeaks in conjunction with numerous other media outlets around the world were documents that were stolen by Julian Assange. Even the United States government admits that what happened is what everyone knows happened, which is that a U.S. Army private sitting in Iraq was going through documents, saw a bunch of documents that she believed revealed serious war crimes on the part of the Obama administration and the Bush administration before that and U.S. allies around the world. She downloaded those documents onto a thumb drive and then sent them to Julian Assange. He didn't have advanced knowledge of it. All he did was receive it and then went and published it. Nobody denies that. That's not in dispute. No one claims what Joe Scarborough just accused, not even accused Julian Assange of doing, but outright stated that he did, that he stole documents. Here, for example, let's just use the most mainstream source, is that same New York Times article I showed you from December 10th, 2021, that's reporting on the court ruling in the UK that Julian Assange can be extradited to the US. And it talks about, it describes what actually the US government has alleged Julian Assange did. Quote, "The case against Mr. Assange centers on his 2010 publication of diplomatic and military files leaked by Chelsea Manning, a former Army intelligence analyst, not on his publication during the 2016 election of Democratic emails stolen by Russia." The New York Times is correct. That is exactly what they're accusing him of doing. Leaking, or publishing rather, diplomatic and military files not stolen by Julian Assange, but leaked to WikiLeaks by Chelsea Manning. The article goes on to state, over the course of three indictments developed during the Trump administration, prosecutors have made two sets of accusations. There are two things they claim Julian Assange did beyond just publish the documents. Here's the New York Times description of what they claim he did. The first is that Mr. Assange participated in a criminal hacking conspiracy, both by offering to help Ms. Manning mask her tracks on a secure computer network and by engaging in a broader effort to encourage hackers to obtain secret material and send it to WikiLeaks. The other is that his solicitation and publication of information the government deemed secret violated the Espionage Act. That is the full and complete extent of what the Justice Department claims Julian Assange did that makes him a criminal. Not that he stole any of the documents that he published, but that he helped Chelsea Manning, or attempted to help her, mask what she was doing so that she wouldn't get caught as she continued to go through these files, and that he encouraged or solicited sources to give him secret information, which they're now trying to turn into a crime. There is no allegation in any of the materials the Justice Department has filed, and nobody thinks it's true what Joe Scarborough stated, that Julian Assange himself stole classified and secret information. It is an outright lie. Now, this argument that the government is making, that he's a criminal because he tried to help his source mask herself so she didn't get caught, and tried to solicit, and that WikiLeaks solicited or encouraged sources to provide classified information. The reason why this is so dangerous, that press freedom groups around the world are condemning this prosecution, which is now in the hands of the Biden Justice Department, as such a grave threat to press freedom, is because all media outlets, mainstream media outlets, do exactly this. Every day you can go on Twitter and see reporters encouraging sources saying, if you have classified documents or government or state secrets that you want to leak to me, here's my number on Signal, here's how you can do it. Encouraging sources to give you information is the essence of investigative journalism. If Julian Assange is a criminal for doing that, then journalism itself has become criminalized. Here, look at the New York Times page itself. If you go to Google and type, how do I leak to the New York Times? They have on their site a page encouraging sources to leak classified information to them and helping sources mask their tracks so they don't get caught. Exactly what the government claims Julian Assange did. So here's the New York Times, nyt.com/tips, where they say, got a confidential news tip? It goes on, do you have the next big story? Want to share it with the New York Times? We offer several ways to get in touch. with and provide materials to our journalists. No communication is completely secure, but these tools can help protect your anonymity. We've outlined each below, but please review any app's terms and instructions as well. Please do not send feedback, story ideas, pitches, or press releases through these channels, because the only thing they want there is for sources to send them secrets that the New York Times publishes all the time. They solicit the classified documents and other state secrets, and then they report on them and publish them exactly as WikiLeaks is alleged to have done. Here, for example, is the New York Times telling people how to use the encrypted app Signal in order to contact their reporters so that they don't get caught, so they can mask their tracks. Here is the New York Times encouraging sources that they're soliciting to use SecureDrop, which is a system developed by the Freedom of the Press Foundation, invented and pioneered by a young privacy activist named Aaron Swartz, that is now in the newsrooms of up to 60 media outlets throughout the West, that is designed to encourage sources to leak state secrets and classified documents to news outlets without getting caught. That's why press freedom groups have decided to make such a bold statement in denouncing this prosecution as a grave threat to press freedom. Here is Reporters Without Borders, the press freedom group, on December 10th, after the decision in England was issued, upholding the Biden administration's extradition request. You can see the headline: Reporters Without Borders condemns the UK High Court's decision allowing for Julian Assange's extradition to the US and calls for his immediate release. Here's the Committee to Protect Journalists on the same day. The UK ruling on extraditing WikiLeaks' Assange, quote, seriously damages journalism. Obviously, these press freedom groups know that Assange wasn't accused of what Joe Scarborough said, stealing classified information. No one thinks a journalist is allowed to do that. That's not what he's alleged to have done. That's why the Committee to Protect Journalists is saying this ruling and this attempt to prosecute him seriously damages journalism. The article goes on, quote, the Committee to Protect Journalists today expressed deep disappointment at a British court's decision to uphold the United States Justice Department's appeal to extradite Julian Assange, which allows the U.S. to continue pursuing the extradition of the WikiLeaks founder, according to news reports. Quote, on the same day the Nobel Peace Prize honors journalists, a U.S. court ruled that the United States can extradite Julian Assange, a move that seriously damages journalism, said Committee to Protect Journalists Deputy Executive Director Robert Mahoney. This is why it is so surreal to watch people who call themselves journalists, but who obviously aren't, like Joe Scarborough and many others, like Jim Acosta on CNN, who did the same thing, justifying the prosecution of Assange because he's not accused of stealing anything. He's accused of encouraging sources to publish, to provide materials to him that are in the public interest, like every media outlet does. Here's the freedom of the Committee to Protect Journalists goes on. The U.S. Justice Department's dogged pursuit of the WikiLeaks founder has set a harmful legal precedent for prosecuting reporters simply for interacting with their sources. Do you see the Committee to Protect Journalists describing correctly what he's accused of doing? Simply for interacting with their sources, not, as Joe Scarborough claimed, for stealing documents. The quote, the Biden administration pledged at its Summit for Democracy this week to support journalism. It could start by removing the threat of prosecution under the Espionage Act, now hanging over the heads of investigative journalists everywhere. Here is the Freedom of the Press Foundation, of which I'm a co-founder, and until this week was on its board. My term expired naturally, and I decided to leave to give other people a chance. They had the same reaction, quote, Assange to face extradition from the United Kingdom. Freedom of the Press Foundation responds, and here's what Trevor Timm, the executive director of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, said about the court ruling. Quote, these proceedings and today's ruling are a black mark on the history of press freedom. That United States prosecutors continue to push for this outcome is a betrayal of the journalistic principles the Biden administration has taken credit for celebrating. As brave whistleblowers have explained for decades, this kind of abuse of the Espionage Act against sources, and now journalists and publishers, is an embarrassment to basic ideals of justice and to core First Amendment values. Every press freedom group in the West, every civil liberties group in the West, including the ACLU, has made very clear that they regard what is being done to Julian Assange as a grave threat to press freedom precisely because Joe Scarborough is a liar, when he said that Julian Assange stole the documents that were published. Everyone knows that not even the US government claims that. And yet NBC News broadcast that and spread it to who knows how many people, deceiving and misleading people about what Julian Assange did, about the core claim against him, because Joe Scarborough is permitted, not just permitted, but encouraged and paid millions of dollars a year to just outright lie to the public. That is the threat that we face when it comes to disinformation. It emanates from 30 Rockefeller Plaza and NBC News headquarters, not from Facebook and QAnon and 4chan and the other places that our would-be censors keep claiming. Now, let me show you the next outright lie that came out of Joe Scarborough's mouth immediately following the one that I just showed you, and I would argue this one is even more severe.
And in so doing, put the lives of U.S. troops, of people who were working with the United States, allies, collaborators in war zones, in the gravest of danger under any scenario.
Okay, that is a very serious claim to make. That the documents that were published by WikiLeaks put huge numbers of people, our service members, as well as people with whom we collaborate and partner, in the gravest of danger. Who is it that WikiLeaks endangered specifically through the publication of these materials? Moreover, WikiLeaks, in these documents that they published that are the basis of this prosecution, of this indictment, as I showed you, which are the 2010 Iraq and Afghanistan war logs and diplomatic cables, partnered with the New York Times and El País and The Guardian and Der Spiegel and many other outlets around the world. But Joe Scarborough is too much of a coward to accuse those newspapers of putting people's lives in danger by the publications that they did, so he's willing to say that about Julian Assange. You will never hear a single person like Joe Scarborough who makes that claim, which is a lie, identify even one individual that has been jeopardized, had their lives or liberty jeopardized by WikiLeaks' publication, because it's an outright lie. They will never point to any evidence because it's an outright lie. And I'm about to show that to you. The idea that WikiLeaks' publication of these materials put people in danger was a claim that Obama officials made in the days following the publication of the first set of documents. They immediately started claiming what they always claim in these cases. They said the same thing about our reporting with Edward Snowden, about the Pentagon Papers. It's their go-to claim. They say it whether or not it's true, that publication of these secrets put people's lives in jeopardy. So here from NPR, on July 30th, 2010, is a headline that reads, WikiLeaks founder may have blood on his hands, the Joint Chief Chairman says. Here's NPR doing propaganda for the government. NPR has no idea whether this is true, but they're willing to publish an extremely grave accusation that comes from a senior Obama military official claiming Julian Assange has blood on his hands because he's not, like Joe Scarborough, willing to say it about the New York Times or The Guardian or the other newspapers. They're willing to say it about Julian Assange. But that was the claim almost immediately in 2010, that he has blood on his hands. That's what they disseminated into the ether. It's the same claim Joe Scarborough, 11 years later, made on NBC News. Here's what the NPR article said. At a Pentagon press briefing yesterday, Admiral Mike Mullen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, commented on the publication of some 91,000 classified documents by WikiLeaks, which was founded by Julian Assange. Quote, Mr. Assange can say whatever he likes about the greater good he thinks he and his sources are doing, but the truth is they might already have on their hands the blood of some young soldier or that of an Afghan family, he said, end quote. So NPR is just repeating an extremely grave accusation without any evidence of all, claiming that Julian Assange has the blood of some young soldier or an Afghan family on his hands. Here was the tweet in 2010 by Admiral Mullen, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he tweeted, meant what I said. Mr. Assange and his source might already have on their hands the blood of our troops or that of our Afghan partners. That was July 29th, 2010. So Joe Scarborough is taking the claim of the U.S. government that was made over and over 11 years ago, and he's repeating it now as fact, accusing Julian Assange of having endangered numerous lives. Back then, they never identified a single person. In fact, they didn't even pretend that they knew for sure. They said he may have blood on his hands. Joe Scarborough has taken government propaganda and strengthened it by asserting as fact that he endangered the lives of people. Numerous media outlets over the years investigated this claim, and they concluded that it is a lie, that there is no evidence that the publication of these documents by WikiLeaks ever endangered anyone, and that even government officials, including senior military officials with the Obama administration, ultimately admitted way back in 2013, so 7 years ago, that what Joe Scarborough said in that clip is a lie, that WikiLeaks did not endanger anyone, and that there's no evidence that they did. I'm about to show you the definitive proof that Joe Scarborough just simply outright lied again. Here's an article from the Washington Post on August 11th, 2010. So very shortly after Admiral Mullen first made this claim that WikiLeaks might have blood on their hands. It's an article where the Pentagon is claiming there may be undisclosed WikiLeaks documents yet to come that are potentially more explosive. So they were trying to fearmonger about WikiLeaks. Here's what that article, though, said. They cited the quote from Admiral Mullen that I just read you, that Mr. Assange can say whatever he likes, but the truth is they might already have on their hands the blood of some young soldier, that of an Afghan family. The Washington Post then went on to quote Morell saying, quote, "We have yet to see any harm come to anyone in Afghanistan that we can directly tie to exposure in the WikiLeaks documents." He asserted, though, there is a likelihood, in all likelihood, a lag between exposure of these documents and jeopardy in the field. So already in August of 2010, they're admitting that they have yet to see any harm come to anyone in Afghanistan that they could tie to exposure as a result of WikiLeaks' documents. Here's an article from the Washington Post 6 months later, November 30th, 2010, that says, quote, Gates, who's the defense secretary for President Obama, warnings of WikiLeaks fallout was overblown. So Obama's own Pentagon chief is warning that the claims about the damage done by WikiLeaks' publication of the diplomatic cables and other documents, in his words, in Secretary Gates' words, was overblown. Quote, the Washington Post, the Obama administration has warned WikiLeaks that the group's release of a huge cache of U.S. diplomatic cables could threaten the lives of, quote, countless innocent individuals and ruin relations with allies. But count Defense Secretary Robert M. Gates as a skeptic that the fallout will be so dire. At a press conference Tuesday, he reminded reporters that the U.S. government's habit of leaking secrets about other countries is as old as the Republic and that predictions of doom rarely pan out. Quote, let me just offer some perspective of somebody who's been at this for a long time, said Gates, a former director of the CIA. Every other government in the world knows that the United States government leaks like a sieve, and it has for a long time. Now, I've heard the impact of these releases on our own foreign policy described as a meltdown, as a game changer, and so on. I think those descriptions are fairly significantly overwrought, Defense Secretary Gates added. The fact is, governments deal with the United States because it is in their interest, not because they like us, not because they trust us, and not because they believe we can keep secrets. Some governments deal with us because they fear us, some because they respect us, most because they need us. We are still, essentially, it's been said before, the indispensable nation, and that won't change or stop, Gates said, even if it means a temporary period of deep chagrin for U.S. leaders. Quote, is this embarrassing? Yes. Is it awkward? Yes. Consequences for U.S. foreign policy? I think fairly modest. That was Robert Gates, the former official for George Bush, the former CIA director, now defense secretary in 2010 for Obama, admitting that all of these claims that the government originally made about the WikiLeaks releases were completely overwrought, were drama queen hysteria, that it was unlikely to have any real effect on U.S. foreign policy. It didn't mean the revelations were insignificant. We learned a great deal, but he was saying that the damage to the United States would be limited and minimal, contrary to what Joe Scarborough went on camera a week ago on NBC and told viewers that it had endangered the lives of huge numbers of people. Now, there's many more investigations that proved over the years that this original claim made by the government was an absolute lie. Here from Reuters, January 11th, 2011, so a couple of months after Defense Secretary Gates said that in public, the article of Reuters was headlined, U.S. officials privately say that the damage from WikiLeaks is limited. Here's the Reuters article. Quote, internal U.S. government reviews have determined that a mass leak of diplomatic cables caused only limited damage to U.S. interest abroad, despite the Obama administration's public statements to the contrary. Look at that. Obama officials are admitting to Reuters in secret that their review of the impact of these documents contradict the claims they made publicly to the American people, which is another way of saying Obama officials lied when they told the public that they thought WikiLeaks would have blood on their hands and that it would severely damage U.S. national security for decades to come. Their own reviews determined that that was untrue, that there would only be limited damage to U.S. interest abroad. Reuters went on to say, quote, a congressional office briefed on the review said the administration felt compelled to say publicly that the revelations had seriously damaged American interest in order to bolster legal efforts to shut down the WikiLeaks website and bring charges against the leaker. Please look at that and read that. Do you see what they're saying there? The Obama officials talking to Reuters are saying that they know and knew that it was a lie, that WikiLeaks had blood on its hands, that WikiLeaks had severely endangered national security, that WikiLeaks had put people in harm's way, but they felt compelled to lie to the public anyway, knowing it was untrue, because they wanted to bolster their legal efforts to shut down the WikiLeaks website and bring charges against the leaker. They're admitting that they purposely lied about the impact of the WikiLeaks disclosures. The Reuters article goes on. I think they want to present the toughest case, the toughest front they can muster, the official said. But State Department officials have privately told Congress they expect overall damage to U.S. foreign policy to be containable, said the official, one of two congressional aides familiar with the briefings who spoke to Reuters on condition of anonymity. A spokeswoman for the Office of Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, which oversees all U.S. intelligence agencies, said, quote, the irresponsible and reckless behavior of WikiLeaks has of course caused damage and will continue to be damaging in the months and years to come. So publicly, when they have to put their name on it, they're continuing to maintain the lie that Joe Scarborough told, that these documents are endangering people. But privately, they're saying they know that this is a lie. The Reuters article goes on. Current and former intelligence officials note that while WikiLeaks has released a handful of inconsequential CIA analytical reports, the website has made public few, if any, real intelligence secrets, including reports from undercover agents or ultra-sensitive technical intelligence reports, such as spy satellite pictures or communication intercepts. They never publish the names of any secret agents, of any undercover agents, of any collaborators or informants in other countries working with the United States. This is what they told Reuters all the way back in 2011. And if anyone covering WikiLeaks' release at the time, like I was, knew that this was true, WikiLeaks had carefully gone through the documents and made sure that no names were released. They go on. Shortly before WikiLeaks began its gradual release of State Department cables last year, department officials sent emails to contacts on Capitol Hill predicting dire consequences, said one of the two congressional aides briefed on the internal government reviews. However, shortly after stories about the cables first began to appear in the media, State Department officials were already playing down the damage, the two congressional officials said. This shows you how the government operates in general and how it operated here. They were repeatedly smearing WikiLeaks. that they had endangered all kinds of people, had threatened national security, had exposed the identity of top secret sources, when all along they knew that that was a lie, and in private were telling both Congress and their favorite reporters that what they were saying publicly is true. And yet that doesn't stop Joe Scarborough 8 years later making this claim that all the way back in 2012, everyone knew was an absolute lie. Now, I presume you can see from this mountain of evidence that there is absolutely no question, none, that Joe Scarborough lied in that clip when he said that WikiLeaks endangered people's lives. But I just want to nonetheless show you one more definitive, conclusive investigation that was undertaken by McClatchy's at the end of the year when WikiLeaks was done with its publications to show you how dispositive this fact is. The reporter from McClatchy, Nancy Youssef, is a highly respected, intrepid, diligent investigative journalist who has done great work over the years. She did a deep dive to determine whether there was any evidence for this claim they kept circulating that WikiLeaks had endangered people's lives or led to the deaths of service members or partners of the United States. And the headline shows the conclusion, although very understated, as you're about to see, which was, quote, officials may be overstating the danger from WikiLeaks. Look at what this investigation found. Quote, American officials in recent days have warned repeatedly that the release of documents by WikiLeaks could put people's lives in danger. But despite similar warnings ahead of the previous two massive releases of classified U.S. intelligence reports by the website, U.S. officials concede that they have no evidence to date that the documents led to anyone's death. Pentagon spokesman Jeff Morrell has said previously that there was no evidence that anyone has been killed because of the leaks. Quote, we have yet to see any harm come to anyone in Afghanistan that we can directly tie to exposure in the WikiLeaks documents, Morrell told the Washington Post on August 11th. That's the admission I showed you from 4 months earlier. Sunday, another Pentagon official told McClatchy that the military still has no evidence that the leaks have led to any deaths. The official didn't want to be named because of the issue's sensitivity. 8 years later, 10 years later, 11 years later, there is still no evidence, and there never was any evidence, that WikiLeaks endangered the lives of anyone. So what justifies NBC News allowing someone to go on the air and accuse Julian Assange while he's rotting in prison of telling the public something that not even the U.S. government claims, which is that there's evidence that WikiLeaks put the lives of service members or partners in danger? Who are those people, Joe Scarborough? Where is the evidence for it? He knows it doesn't exist, or he doesn't care, which, as I said, is the definition, the classic definition of a lie. That's the second one that he told. Let's look at the next one from this 2-minute clip.
Sure. Under any scenario, you take politics out of it, and this is an open and shut case. This is not the Pentagon Papers. This wasn't Times editors rifling through documents, figuring out what could be released and what couldn't be released and explaining it. This was a guy that got stolen documents and gave it to the world.
Okay, first of all, you notice there, he just said this was a guy who got stolen documents and gave them to the world, which directly contradicts his first lie that Assange himself was the one who stole them. How could Assange have gotten stolen documents if he himself was the one who stole them? But the lie that Joe Scarborough just told, it may not be the most significant of the ones that he told, since the other ones involve claiming that Julian Assange is a thief, and that he killed people or put people in danger, but it's the easiest one. I can't even believe that Joe Scarborough just said what he said. He's trying to distinguish what WikiLeaks did from what the New York Times did in the Pentagon Papers case. And in order to do that, he's saying, in the New York Times case, they get documents, they curate them, they go through them, they decide which documents should and shouldn't be published, and then they publish the secret documents they believe should be published and then tell the world what they mean. And he's trying to distinguish what WikiLeaks did by claiming that's not what happened here. New York Times reporters weren't going through these documents and deciding which ones should and shouldn't be published. Instead, this is just Julian Assange dumping them indiscriminately into the world. I can't tell you with words what a lie that is. What he said didn't happen is, in fact, exactly what happened. And everyone knows this. In 2010, when WikiLeaks got these materials, the first thing they did was they called major media outlets, New York Times, The Guardian, other outlets around the world, and said, we want to partner with you in publishing and reporting on these documents. And what they really wanted to do was to work with media outlets in each country to give those media outlets in that country the documents that pertained to their country, documents that showed corruption on the part of Italy. They wanted to work with Italian newspapers in order to report. Documents that showed war crimes by the United States, they worked with the New York Times to report. Documents that showed torture by British soldiers, they worked with The Guardian to report. They formed partnerships with media outlets around the world and then proceeded to do exactly what Joe Scarborough just said that they didn't do, which was work with editors to decide which documents should and shouldn't be published. Now, that may not be the gravest lie, given that the other ones involve accusations that he stole thousands of classified documents and that he has blood on his hands from endangering people's lives, but it's the easiest one to prove what a flagrant lie it is, given that WikiLeaks did exactly that, which Joe Scarborough just got done saying they didn't do. Namely, they collaborated with media outlets around the world, including the New York Times, and then collaborated with their editors to go through each document to decide which should be published and which shouldn't, and told the story of what these documents show. Now, there's so much evidence proving that. Here, for example, is an AP article published by the San Diego Union Tribune, one of the many AP outlets, on December 3rd, 2010. You see the headline there. Respected media outlets collaborate with WikiLeaks, which you just heard Joe Scarborough telling NBC viewers is what they didn't do. The article states, quote, the diplomatic records exposed on the WikiLeaks website this week revealed not only secret government communications, but also an extraordinary collaboration between some of the world's most respected media outlets and the WikiLeaks organization. WikiLeaks turned over all of the classified U.S. State Department cables it obtained to Le Monde, El País in Spain, The Guardian in Britain, and Der Spiegel in Germany. The Guardian shared the material with the New York Times, and 5 news organizations have been working together to plan the timing of their reports. That goes on. They have also been advising WikiLeaks on which documents to release publicly and what documents to make, what redactions to make to those documents, Kaufman and others involved in the arrangement said. Quote, this is Julian Assange. The cables we have released correspond to stories released by our mainstream media partners and ourselves. They have been redacted by the journalists working on the stories, as these people must know the material well in order to write about it, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange said in a question and answer session on The Guardian's website Friday. They were partnering with these media outlets and redacting in unison information that could actually endanger people. The article goes on. The redactions are then reviewed by at least one other journalist or editor, and we review samples supplied by the other organizations to make sure the process is working. Do you see what a liar Joe Scarborough is? He explained that the process that happened in the Pentagon Papers report, that the New York Times editors go through documents and make sure which ones should be published and which ones aren't based on news judgments and withhold ones that are dangerous, didn't happen here, when I just showed you it's exactly that process, exactly what happened here, not just with editors around the world randomly, but including the ones at the New York Times. Now, let me show you what the New York Times itself did when partnering with WikiLeaks and publication of these documents. Exactly the thing that Joe Scarborough denied happened. Here is the page that the New York Times published on the first day that the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs were published in partnership with WikiLeaks. You see it right there, the New York Times, the war logs. And this is their cover page, and you can see all the different articles that they published. They published an article about Julian Assange. They published all the different articles about what the document showed. This was the New York Times working with WikiLeaks, publishing the war logs. And here was one of the articles where they explained the process that they used. It was called, quote, the headline was The Iraq Archive, The Strands of a War. Here's what the New York Times told their readers about what they were doing. A huge trove of secret field reports from the battleground of Iraq sheds new light on the war, including such fraught subjects as civilian deaths, detainee abuse, and the involvement of Iran. The secret archive is the second such cache obtained by the independent organization WikiLeaks and made available to several news organizations. Like the first release, some 77,000 reports covering 6 years of the war in Afghanistan, the Iraq documents provide no earth-shaking revelations, but they offer insight, texture, and context from the people actually fighting the war. Now, I would disagree with the New York Times characterization about what these documents revealed. They showed earth-shattering revelations about war crimes in Iraq and elsewhere, but leave that aside. There's the New York Times explaining the partnership arrangement they had with WikiLeaks, where they worked with WikiLeaks to decide which documents would be published and which ones wouldn't be. Another one of WikiLeaks' partners was the German daily newspaper Der Spiegel. And there you can see Der Spiegel announcing their partnership with WikiLeaks on October 23rd, 2010. There's the WikiLeaks insignia. And here is Der Spiegel explaining to its readers why they decided to publish these materials and how. Quote, the WikiLeaks disclosures. Is it acceptable to publish classified Pentagon documents? Is the need for states to keep secrets more important than the public's right to information? Spiegel has independently vetted and analyzed the WikiLeaks Iraq war logs and has decided to publish them. The reports provide a first-hand view of the war that may change the way people view such campaigns. There is Der Spiegel also explaining the editorial process that they used to select which documents the public had a right to know. Now, as I indicated earlier, WikiLeaks was so intent upon not indiscriminately dumping documents, but carefully editing the documents and ensuring that nothing dangerous was done to anybody, that they wrote a letter to Hillary Clinton's State Department saying, we'd like to consult with you and show you the documents we intend to publish so that if there's any documents that would actually endanger anybody, you can let us know and we won't publish those. The State Department, as this foreign policy article from November of 2010 indicates, refused to, quote, negotiate with them, when in reality WikiLeaks wasn't looking to negotiate with the State Department. They were asking for the State Department's help to figure out which documents should be redacted to protect the lives of innocent people. Quote, the State Department wrote Saturday to the leaders of the self-described whistleblower website WikiLeaks, telling them the U.S. government won't negotiate ahead of the expected release of hundreds of thousands of sensitive documents. The State Department's top legal advisor, Harold Koh, wrote Saturday to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and his attorney, Jennifer Robinson, in response to a letter WikiLeaks sent the same day to U.S. Ambassador to the United Kingdom, Louis Sussman. The State Department rejected WikiLeaks' requests for the name of individuals who may be, quote, at significant risk of harm due to the release of sensitive documents. Quote, despite your stated desire to protect those lives, you have done the opposite and endangered the lives of countless individuals. The article concluded, we will not engage in a negotiation regarding the further release or dissemination of illegally obtained U.S. government classified materials. That shows that WikiLeaks, not just its partners, was engaged in an effort to editorially withhold any documents that could endanger people. They worked in partnership with the New York Times and other papers to do just that, which is the exact opposite, the precise opposite of what Joe Scarborough claimed in that clip. Now, let's look at the final lie. Just in this 2-minute segment alone, this is the fourth lie I'm about to show you in 2 minutes that came out of the mouths of these two people over the airways of NBC News. This one is from Claire McCaskill.
This is a pretty simple case. It's very straightforward. And the beauty of a trial, Joe, is that you narrow all of the extraneous stuff to the charges that are there against the defendant. And the charges in this case are that he was trying to hack into our military information that protects not just our country, but all the men and women in uniform around the world. This is really serious stuff.
Now, that is serious stuff. Unfortunately for Claire McCaskill, none of that happened. This really wasn't the fourth lie. This was, you could call it lie 1B, since it's the same lie I showed you from Joe Scarborough earlier, claiming that Julian Assange himself was trying to hack into databases of the military to steal documents. As I showed you earlier, not even the government alleges he did that. The only thing the government alleges that he did was attempt to help Chelsea Manning cover her tracks by being able to engage in searching computer files without being detected, source protection. But what he didn't do is what she just said there, hacked into military databases in the United States. That's not even part of the charging document. So let me show you what actually is the fourth lie that came out of this 2-minute segment. This is also courtesy of the former Democratic senator from Missouri.
Forget about the politics. The fact that both the right and the left don't like Julia Assange or love Julia Assange, and depending on the circumstances is being talked about, that should tell you all you need to know. This is really a guy who just violated the law. And, I gotta laugh. If their fight against extradition is that they're worried about his safety in prison, they really don't have perspective on this. There are lots and lots of people who go to federal prison who have done really worse things than Julia Assange, and they are protected in prison. I don't think he needs to worry about whether or not he'll be safe in prison. This is really just a smokescreen to try to keep him from ever being accountable for the rule of law. We started talking about Trump being accountable.
You know what I think this shows? This shows that they went on television to talk about a case that they actually knew nothing about. I don't think Claire McCaskill has read about the Assange case in years, if she ever did. I don't even think that was a deliberate lie, what she just did. I think that just came from complete and utter ignorance. They're not making the argument, Assange's lawyers, that he won't be safe in prison if he's extradited to the United States. That's not their argument. I mean, if you know anything about the case, you would not even think that that's the argument. They made a whole variety of arguments to resist extradition, including the fact that this is a political prosecution, that he was being punished for his rights as a journalist to report on the U.S. government, that it was designed to silence the truth. And the last argument that he made that was accepted by the court in January was that his mental health had deteriorated to such an extent after 10 years in detention that there was a high likelihood, given how repressive the U.S. prison system is, that he would find a way to kill himself. Because under British law, the British government cannot extradite a person when there's a high risk they're going to end up committing suicide. He wasn't concerned about being kept safe in prison. The argument from the court was they thought he would find a way to kill himself. That had nothing to do with what... She just doesn't know anything about the case. Here's the New York Times article from January 4th, 2021. After the judge issued that ruling, there you see the UK judge blocks Assange's extradition to the US, citing mental health. The article says, quote, a British judge ruled on Monday that the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange cannot be extradited to the United States to face trial on charges of violating the Espionage Act, saying he would be at extreme risk of suicide. Rights groups and advocates applauded the ruling, but many expressed concern about its rationale. The judge focused on Mr. Assange's mental health issues, but rejected the defense argument that the charges were an attack on press freedom and were politically motivated. She ruled that the extradition should be refused because, quote, it would be unjust and oppressive by reason of Mr. Assange's mental condition, pointing to conditions he most likely would be held under in the United States. So Claire McCaskill goes on the air and she says they have no argument other than their concern for his safety in prison, when in fact they had a long list of arguments that were about politics and political persecution and the constitutional right to do reporting and one's human rights to report on the government, all of which she ignored. She doesn't know about those. And she said their only argument to resist extradition is they're worried about his safety in prison, which wasn't even one of his arguments at all, let alone his only one. So I think the reason it's worth taking the time that I took to break down this segment is because we know so often it's the case that if you go on YouTube as a regular citizen or on Twitter or Facebook and you say something that authorities decide isn't true, you'll be banned and you'll have your content deleted. You'll be silenced. And the Democratic Party, as I've done reports on over the last 18 months, has as one of their top priorities insisting that Silicon Valley censor even more than they're already doing because, say, the Democratic Party, they're so desperately concerned about the harms from disinformation emanating from private citizens and their use of social media to disseminate fake news, lies, and misinformation. In reality, the fake news comes from the corporate media outlets that these Democrats love. It comes from NBC News. I'm still amazed, even after 15 years of being a harsh media critic, when I watch that clip and go through it, that again, it didn't just contain one lie. It contained 4 of them, 5 of them, depending on how you count, in rapid succession, one after the other, without even blinking, all designed to justify the imprisonment of an actual journalist, of somebody who is actually, unlike those two, done real reporting. These lies are pernicious, and they're damaging, and they're toxic. And this is where disinformation is coming from. And I can tell you for certain that no matter how much dispositive evidence I amassed, and other people have noted as well, that that segment was full of lies. Anyone who's covered the Assange case, regardless of their opinion of it, knows that those are all lies. I can tell you for sure that they're not going to suffer any consequences for it at all. Because part of their job is not to tell the truth. They're allowed to lie. They're encouraged to lie. They're paid to lie. That is not an exaggeration. I used to think that was an exaggeration when people said that about highly paid employees of large media corporations, that they're paid to lie. I used to think that that was an overstatement, that they just didn't care, network executives, if they said untrue things, as long as the audience was happy with it. But I realize now, actually, that is the proper formulation. They're paid to lie. They're paid to tell viewers what they want to hear. And what Democrats who watch MSNBC want to hear is that Julian Assange is, as Joe Scarborough said, not somebody who might have committed crimes and should stand trial, but somebody who is an open and shut criminal, someone who stole military secrets that put people's lives in danger. And they want to hear that because they hate Julian Assange, not because he published these documents, but because he reported in 2016 in ways that reflected poorly on the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton, and that Hillary Clinton herself blames, along with Jim Comey, for her defeat. That's why Democrats hate Julian Assange so much. That's why they want him in prison. And that's why it's the job of people who work for NBC News, like Joe Scarborough and Claire McCaskill, to go on the air and lie about this case in order to justify what the Biden administration is doing in imprisoning a journalist, to lie to the public and say that even though ordinarily you would be bothered if other countries imprisoned a journalist, in this case, you should be happy because he's not a journalist. He stole top secret documents or secret documents that endangered people's lives and didn't do any editing, just dumped them all on the internet. And now to resist extradition is claiming that he's afraid for his life in prison. None of which is true, all of which are lies. So I think it is worth it to document these lies, even though nothing will happen to them, because they are losing their audience, and they're losing their audience more and more to independent platforms like this one, precisely because people know that what they're saying is unreliable, is untrustworthy, that those are propagandists and liars. And so the reason it's so important to document it this way is not because I expect Joe Scarborough will be fired and Claire McCaskill will be disciplined. They're doing their jobs of lying. The reason it's so important is to continue to show the public that they are right to hate this part of the media, that they are right to tune them out, that they are right to seek out additional or alternative sources for news and information, that they are right only to trust platforms that are independent, that aren't paid or incentivized to lie, but are paid and incentivized to tell the truth.